Right. So thank you, David, for these introductions, and hello, everyone. Ellen and I are very grateful for the invitation to speak at your annual conference and for your interest to learn more about our work on next generation metadata. So I work for OCLC Research. I'm based in Leiden in the Netherlands, although since we work online only due to Corona, our location really doesn't matter very much anymore. But for my work, coordinating and extending OCLC's research work throughout Europe, being able to communicate more online and travel less has been much more productive. And today's opportunity to talk to so many of you all the way in Norway is a perfect example of this. So what is OCLC Research? Maybe very briefly to explain, we are a group of 40 researchers with different expertise and skills. We don't do research in an ivory tower. We are a community resource. We serve the global network of OCLC member libraries and beyond. And we devote our effort exclusively to the challenges that librarians face. On this slide, you can see our main areas of focus today. Data science is one of these areas, which I will talk about today. It is the area where we work on data modeling, linked data, semantic similarity clustering, and so on, and where we apply data science techniques and machine learning to make the library data of our member libraries work harder for them. We carry out pilots and do prototyping, and this work also supports the innovation of OCLC products. Our research is open. We share all our findings and results via research reports and webinar recordings that are freely available on the web. If you are interested to follow us, please visit our website and read our blog, Hanging Together. David invited us to speak on the topic of that was covered in the research report on transitioning to the next generation of metadata. This report discusses some of the basic questions that have kept librarians busy in the past years, such as why is metadata changing? How is the creation process changing? How is the metadata itself changing? What impact will these changes have on future staffing requirements, and how can libraries prepare? And this has been the discussion of many conferences, including this one, of course. We thought we'd give you some more context and a taste of how this report fits in the bigger picture. So, firstly, the report in question is the outcome of 6 years of conversations that we had in the context of the OCLC Research Library Partners Metadata Focus Group discussions. That's a mouthful. Let me explain what this is. The OCLC Research Library Partnership is a network of 130 plus research libraries across the globe who convene virtually, mostly, in working groups and discussions, in discussion groups together to connect, to share, and to act in response to the rapidly changing environment. One of these groups is the Metadata Managers Focus Group, in which 62 library partners participate. They meet regularly to discuss metadata-related topics. We facilitate these discussions, and we have summarized this group's discussions that were held between 2015 and 2020. In total, 93 hours of intense exchanges and discussions are summarized in this report. After the report was published at the end of last year, we used it as a source of inspiration for another series of discussions, our virtual roundtable discussions that we organized in 6 different European languages with metadata experts coming from mostly Europe. In this way, we could engage librarians around this topic in their own language. All in all, This has been a huge effort in cultivating and sharing understanding on this topic with hundreds of professionals from different countries. In the following slides, I will report back on these discussions. But alongside this effort of cultivating understanding, we have also put research to work and have been experimenting with doing linked data at scale. The last 3 years especially have led to the culmination of research, experimentation and prototyping. And we are currently translating this into the implementation of a scalable and sustainable infrastructure with services that will support a variety of different linked data creation and shared management workflows. And Ellen will talk a little bit more about this shared entity management infrastructure project. So now, after this long introduction, back to the group discussions and the report. Karen Smith Yoshimura is the author of the report. She is a former colleague of ours. She retired a few months ago, but she was the one who facilitated the discussions with the Metadata Managers Focus Group for as long as the group exists. And in the last years, the discussions have been focusing on the need for change and a new direction. And so she is now the author of this report. What was the problem? Quite simply, there was a lot of frustration about the state of current metadata. Format-specific metadata management based on curated text strings in bibliographic records, understood only by library systems, is nearing obsolescence, both conceptually and technically. Or as the British Library observes in their collection management strategy of 2019-2023, traditional methods of metadata generation, management and dissemination are not scalable or appropriate to an era of rapid digital change, rising audience expectations, and diminishing resources. In short, the metadata could be better, there is not enough of it, and the metadata that does exist is not used widely outside the library domain. So something clearly needs to change. Karen's report categorizes the discussion in 4 chapters. I will rapidly go through these chapters with you. A large part of the report depicts the changes taking place in the transition to linked data and identifiers. In particular, the changing resource description workflows, moving from original cataloging to entity description, from copy cataloging to link management, from library authority control to vocabularies from many sources. And in all the discussions over the years, the metadata managers viewed persistent identifiers as crucial to transitioning from current metadata to future applications. One of the shifts underway is the shift from authority control to identity management and the growing importance of identifier hubs, such as Wikidata, to aggregate identifiers pointing to the same entity and also offering labels in different languages and writing systems. In this example from the American poet Maya Angelou, you see a sample of the 60+ identifiers and name labels that Wikidata has aggregated together, including those from the library domain. If compared to authority control, identity management poses a change in focus to describing entities and the relationships between them. This new focus on entities and links is relevant in many ways. I will give just one example in the next slide, but in the report you will find much more. So the ability to link to multiple vocabularies with different labels is a promising approach to address, for example, multilingualism and translations, which has been a long-standing frustration for cataloging practices. And addressing language issues is also important, as libraries are seeking to build trust with marginalized communities. In 2017, OCLC Research conducted a survey on the topic of equity, diversity, and inclusion, and asked institutions in the Research Library Partnership, what areas have you changed or do you plan to change due to your institution's EDI goals and principles? In comparison to all the changes institutions have already made in their workflows to comply with their EDI goals and principles, metadata in library catalogs, the third from left on the graph, lagged behind. Institutions were planning changes, but about a third only had implemented changes. So the transition to linked data and identifiers is really key to achieving important library goals in a number of areas, such as this one. The next chapter in the report focuses on specific challenges in describing both the inside-out and the facilitated collections, which are two newly evolving collection directions, often contrasted to the old paradigm of the outside-in collection. I can talk more about these collection directions if you have questions about them. Please put your questions in chat. Don't forget to do that. On the topic of the inside-out collection, which includes the unique materials created and curated by institutions, the metadata managers' discussions reflected the firm belief that metadata underlies all discovery, regardless of format, now and in the future. That is at least one constant for us. Discussions on discovery across digitized image collections were informed by OCLC researchers' prototyping of the IIIF Explorer, which is based on the International Image Interoperability Format, using structured metadata to retrieve images across different institutions and collections. And we also discussed newly emerging metadata domains, such as RDM, Research Data Management. Discussions revealed that metadata specialists were often not included in the earliest stages of the research lifecycle. However, as the report observes, libraries' expertise in metadata standards, identifiers, linked data, and data sharing systems, as well as technical systems, can be invaluable to the research lifecycle. So there clearly are challenges, but also opportunities. The next chapter, Metadata as a Service, refers to uses of metadata beyond describing materials. In particular, the use of metadata as data in data-driven applications, such as, for example, visualization applications, as the two examples on this slide illustrate. On the left-hand side, you see a visualization of the distribution of Australian Aboriginal languages as represented in the Australian National Bibliographic Database, drawn from the language code assigned. The photo on the right, maybe you will recognize it, it shows a decoration in the lobby of the headquarters of the Hachette Publishers Group, the River of Authors, it's called. It's based on bibliometrics supplied by the British Library on Hachette's top authors represented in the British Library's catalogue, an arty example of metadata visualization. Metadata as a service is a growing market and includes notably research metrics and analytics services. So all these developments clearly have implications on the staffing requirements, and this generated lots of discussions among the metadata managers. A culture shift is needed from pride in production alone to valuing opportunities to learn, explore, and try new approaches to metadata work. Other topics are new skills needed, self-education, addressing staff turnover, etc. Much on this. Focus group's expectation is that the next generation of metadata will become, can you still hear me? Yes, okay. Will become even more focused on entities rather than record-based descriptions of an institution's collections. So the report concludes with the work underway at OCLC on the shared entity management infrastructure, about which Ellen will talk in the next few slides. And the expectation is that it will address many of the challenges documented around, namely persistent identifiers, and especially providing language-neutral links to trustworthy sources. And now I would like to turn over to Ellen.
Great, thank you, Titia. My name is Ellen Hartman, and I'm a senior library consultant at OCLC. And I'm located normally, like Titia, in our Leiden office, but again, I'm also working from home at the moment. And Titia is going to assist me by turning over the slides when I need them. So thank you, Titia. You can move on to the next one. So like Titia already mentioned in her previous few slides, OCLC has had a very strong interest in linked data. And a lot of libraries look to OCLC for those next steps in the future of metadata. So in the next few minutes, I'm going to share some more information on what OCLC itself has been doing with linked data and what we will do to promote the use and reuse of linked data at a greater scale. You can go to the next slide. Yes, thank you. So OCLC has had a very long history in working with linked data, and through different research projects, like Titia already mentioned, stretching back well over a decade, we've worked to understand what it means to publish linked data. And all these projects and the work that we've done, it taught us that for linked data to move from the theoretical or the project phase into more of common use, libraries need those reliable and persistent identifiers and metadata for those critical entities that they rely on. So all of this work and the expertise that we have culminated last year when OCLC was awarded a Mellon Foundation grant to design, build, and publish an entity management infrastructure to help support linked data work by libraries around the world. So I think that's a really exciting new step for us into a wonderful new direction. And you can go to the next slide. Yes, thank you. So the project that we're currently working on is called SEMI, which is short for the Shared Entity Management Infrastructure. And this project is going to move us beyond that project phase into an actual production environment. And the goal for the project is to build a production infrastructure for the creation of linked data. And with this infrastructure, we anticipate that libraries will be able to use it to increase connections between their materials and other relevant collections, to improve the consistency and efficiency of metadata workflows across collections and material types, and also improve MARC quality, record quality and accuracy, which hopefully will result in new and more efficient metadata workflows. So to complete this project, like I mentioned, we've been given a grant from the Mellon Foundation that we've matched. So we're very excited to be working with them. And we are already well underway, as this is a 2-year project, and it's actually going to be completed at the end of the year. So what's incredibly important to us is that we're working very closely with the library community in achieving this infrastructure. And since linked data is all about creating networks, we can't achieve our goals by operating as an island. So the infrastructure itself will aggregate links to other representations of works and persons in external vocabularies and authority files, and that'll provide a solid foundation for libraries, cultural heritage organizations, and scholarly communications communities. And the goal is, again, to ultimately make their materials more connected and discoverable on the web. Now, the features and functionality that we'll create will be primarily API-based, but we're also providing a basic user interface And we are testing with our library partners and collaborating with the library community to make sure that this infrastructure meets their expectations. And you can already see a large group on the screen. This is a group that we're working with very closely, this international group of libraries, and they are helping us with advice, but also testing all the interfaces and APIs that we are building. And they are part of our advisory group. And it's really important that these contain academic, special, public, and national libraries from all over the world. So together they bring with them a whole range of perspectives and different experiences. Okay, yes, thank you. So what does the infrastructure do exactly? Well, it is an entity ecosystem or knowledge graph that allows for the creation, relating, management, and reconciliation of entities of all relevant types, so people, organizations, places, concepts, and events. And we are building it using open source technologies such as MediaWiki, Wikibase, and OpenRefine. And with this ecosystem, we want to facilitate a community of users that can work together to explore and enhance the infrastructure itself. And of course, very importantly, it offers access to services that allow libraries to create, explore, and reuse linked data. You can go to the next slide. Yes. So when the project is finished, we're going to have a starting point of around 100 million work and person identities available to work with. And to create these entities, we're using many different sources, including, of course, WorldCat data. And here you can see an example of how we are pulling data from different WorldCat records to create one single entity. And you can go to the next slide, please. Thank you. And we're also using different parts of WorldCat records to create different entities. So in the end, one WorldCat record will contain multiple links to different entities as well. And you can go to the next. Thank you. So within the project, which, like I mentioned, it is taking 2 years and it's going to be finished on January 1st, we've been working in 6-month increments with a checkpoint at the end of each increment. And that way of working allowed us to monitor our goals, but also to be able to make changes to our approach as we learn more about working with linked data on this enormous scale. So for example, we started off using Wikibase as the primary technical component, but during the project, we found that it just wasn't scalable enough to manage those hundreds of millions of entities that we want to have. So we've had to switch over to a more hybrid approach, which was fine. We knew we were going to find some things that weren't going to work on that scale. So it is still a project, but the outcome, of course, is something a bit more special. So you can go to the last slide. Thank you. So what can you expect from us on January 1st when this project is going to be completed? Well, January 1st, it is the end of a project, but it is only the start. On January 1st, we'll have the backbone of the infrastructure ready for libraries to use, and it is at production scale. And like I mentioned, it will hold at that point up about 100 million entities representing creative works and persons with persistent URIs. And that is about 16% of the total of entities that we're expecting. So even though 100 million entities is a very large number, it is really just a starting point for us. Also on January 1st, we're just going to have English available as a language, but of course, going forward, because that is just a starting point, we will take a multilingual approach as well, which is logical since this is a global platform and we have a global advisory group as well. So available on January 1st will be a free public website where libraries can do a one-time lookup by URI or by entity label. There is also going to be a basic user interface for editing, and we will expose those services as well using APIs, because at OCLC we have an API first approach, so we want to make sure we are exposing those services. So editing, but also making entities discoverable on the web as well. So all in all, these are going to be very exciting times. I'm personally looking forward to seeing everything that's done on January 1st. So I would definitely recommend looking out for any communications that we are putting out leading up to January 1st, and also taking a look at the interface once it's ready and maybe playing with it a little bit. Okay, I think, Titia, if you can move on to the next slide, we have some links as well.
Exactly.
For those who might be interested to check out some more communications that we have. And we wanted to check if there were any questions halfway through already before we move on to the next part of the presentation.
Or maybe give you some time to put some questions in chat, to take note of the links. And if there are any questions, David, let us know.
I've got lots of questions, but I think I'll leave it for the participants at the moment. Or I could ask one while we're waiting for the participants to ask any questions. I was wondering about this. Well, one comment was that one of the comments we got from our last presentation, which was the presentation was done by a colleague who is teaching metadata at our university, and he talked about linked data and the semantic web, how it was important, and there came a question that said, yeah, but you've been talking about this since 2008, and at this conference has been a theme that's gone all through the time, and so I think this is a really good was a really good answer with a very concrete project. So that's a comment. A question I had was about, you had the different libraries that were responsible for, which were working together with you on this linked data system. Have you worked with organizations outside libraries?
On developing the semi-infrastructure, you mean specifically?
Yeah. What sort of needs do other organizations outside libraries need from our linked data to try and get out of our library silo?
Yeah, so we are of course in touch, because our library community is closely and more in touch with other sectors, including of course cultural heritage, so also archives and museums, GLAM, but also research, the research community obviously, and all the developments that are going there with, you know, all kinds of projects, like the Triple project, the Freya project, which is all looking at leveraging research data and research information data to monitor research and the performance of academia. So these are the most straightforward communities, and then of course the publishers. We have yes, we have also a lot of relationships with publishers.
Is there any cooperation with the Wikidata community?
Yes, we are in touch with them. Some of our colleagues from especially OCLC Research are involved in some of the Wikimedia groups, projects, especially the libraries project, of course. We are aware of the National Libraries project with Wikidata. So yeah, we help them organize conferences there as well. So yeah, and Pedapalooza is also such a community, Eurocris, yeah.
So I can't see any questions.
That's fine, that's fine.
There's one now. That's in the chat, so I can open that. Do you envision this as a one-stop shop for all the library institutions worldwide, transitioning in due course to entity-based metadata?
So, Ellen, if you want to chime in, please go ahead. My answer would be not so much a one-stop shop, but a core a core component of the ecosystem. That's what we'd like to envision it to be. So because it will contain a lot of library data, that is a lot of legacy data as well, which is very important for heritage. But it's not the entry point. It's not the end point either. It's just one of the main hubs that are, you know, taking shape in this ecosystem.
How do you see this working together with local library systems? Yeah.
Ellen.
Yeah, I think that's a very good question. I think at this beginning point, of course, there won't be any integrations yet, but that might be something that would be upcoming, trying to get connection points with local library systems to get that data exchange going. So it's easier to use linked data within your own local library system. Yeah. So I think that is one of the sort of the dots on the horizon. Yeah, not necessarily yet for the very short term.
Because that was one of the answers we gave to the question about why hasn't linked data come yet, that there's so much legacy data within our library catalogs that there's got to be some sort of relationship between the local catalog, well, maybe at different levels, local, national, European, world,
and I think that's why
data.
Yeah, and I think that's why we're taking a sort of an API first approach as well, because exposing these type of services through APIs means that connecting this with individual library system just becomes a lot more easy, and instead of just offering a user interface that everyone would have to work with.
Yeah, that sounds like a good idea, and I think a big question here is trust as well. Yes. To have organizations that we can trust. If we're not making the data ourselves, we got to trust the organizations that are making the data for us. Yeah.
Exactly. This is very interesting, David, because what you're mentioning right now are exactly the points that came up during the discussions that we had recently in March, based on the report with all kinds of librarians from Europe, and which I wanted to give a short presentation on. If we have time, it would take some like 10 minutes or so.
Yeah, should we continue, and maybe people will think of questions while you continue?
Okay, good. Yep. Then we do that.
It's very interesting, as you can hear. I'm very interested in this area with linked data and libraries.
Yes, and it is very exciting. So, okay, so I will report back on the findings from the roundtable discussions that we had. In March, we had 8 roundtable discussions in 6 different languages, in English, French, German, Italian, Dutch, and Spanish. And as I said, it was inspired by the report, and it was background reading for the series. But we did not want to repeat, you know, the discussions that the metadata managers focus group had. And they were really focusing on the what and the why of next generation metadata. So we wanted to move forward, and we asked the question of how and with whom. So how do we make the change happen, and who can help us with it, and who is already working on it? So this was the main discussion question. How do we make the transition to the next generation of metadata happen at the right scale and in a sustainable manner, building an interconnected ecosystem and not a garden of silos? We had in total 86 attendees from 71 institutions coming from 17 countries, mostly from Europe. And as a result, we were able to report back insights gained from each of these discussions in 8 blog posts, which have all been published on Hanging Together. We also translated the posts in the language in which the session was held. And if you haven't read the posts yet, I would certainly encourage you to do so, because they're only a 5 minutes read, and you can get a very good idea of what was discussed there. So these are the 8 maps that came out of the roundtables. We asked attendees to list next generation metadata projects that they were aware of on a 2x2 matrix characterizing 3 application areas. First, in the upper left quadrant, bibliographic data. Second, in the lower left quadrant, cultural heritage data. In the upper right quadrant, we had research information management data, RIM data, and the lower right quadrant for anything else where it couldn't fit, so the category other. A typical library thing to do that, right? So the resulting maps are interesting in several ways, even if they are not really representative, of course, for a region or a whole country, but they nevertheless represent well the focus and the expertise of the attendees. And taken together, they show a range of projects and activities that take place at very different scales, institutional, national, European, international, and they provided good opportunity for a conversation about linking up these initiatives across all these scales. That's what made the conversations really interesting. And so the cultural heritage data projects and the bibliographic data projects were really predominant. There were much less RIM projects on the map. And this is a reflection, of course, of the attendees that were there and the discussions that we had. Also, in each session, the map showed interesting clusters of post-it notes relating to persistent identifiers. ISNI was mentioned a lot, ORCID, Werf, DOI, and others, and it demonstrated the importance attributed to PIDs. So these were the four predominant topics, and I will talk briefly about each. Firstly, libraries currently focus strongly on transforming, publishing, and leveraging their authority data, their authority, the person names, the subject headings, and the open government data policies were repeatedly mentioned as the background and the context for this focus in Europe. This trend is impacting libraries and driving collaboration at national levels. In France, for example, you will have heard the two largest producers of library data, BNF and ABES, have decided to collaborate and bring their data together and co-produce data. This is quite revolutionary in France. The national entities file will be the French knowledge base containing all the entities created by collection holding institutions in France, including authors, but also works, concepts, events, and places. Another example given is in the Netherlands, where a national network of stakeholders across the library, heritage, and media sectors are implementing the Dutch digital heritage strategy of the Ministry of Education and Culture, developing guidelines and giving training to help the community publish its data in ways that it is interoperable and allows for reuse. During the conversations, we also heard a raised in awareness of the need to achieve a critical mass of interoperable library data. In an effort to achieve this critical mass, libraries are intentionally feeding external systems, such as the university's research portal, the ORCID database, Wikidata, etc., with their authority and bibliographic data. They are also embedding PIDs in the supply chain. So in particular, libraries and bibliographic agencies are investing in the assignment of PIDs as registration agencies. For example, the British Library is a registration agency for ISNI. And in this context, they are assigning PIDs in the context of the national bibliography, of the legal deposit tasks, and some of them are encouraging the adoption of these identifiers upstream in publishers' metadata records and downstream through reconciliation with other systems like Werf and Library of Congress NACO files, so that the ISNIs are in the library's cataloging workflows and can be reused. At several sessions, we heard concern about the large number of cultural heritage projects that create separate and dedicated ontologies, which then remain isolated and are of limited value to others. There were many observations about a lack of common standards, lack of interoperability across domains, concerns about duplication of effort, and it all boiled down to lack of trust, and that's what you said, David, lack of trust in external data. As this participant at the Dutch session said, when you refer to data that has already been defined by others, you relinquish control over that piece of information. And that can be a mental barrier against doing linked data the proper way. It is much safer to store and manage all the data in your own silo. But the moment you can let go of that, the world can become much richer than you could achieve on your own. So the question is where to let go of control and where to focus on control. There is a need to negotiate with the different stakeholders and the different parties. Who does what? It's an organizational issue and one of governance. What is the role of national libraries and of international bodies like Werf, the Werf Council, the Library of Congress, etc.? There was also a realization during the discussion sessions that there are multiple coexisting rights scales for next generation metadata that need to be interconnected and managed as a whole. But managed as a whole, again, presupposes organizational and governance structures. Finally, last but not least, skilling staff and professional development was a theme across all sessions. So next generation metadata work is often a stretch assignment on top of the daily routine of librarians. And because old generation systems used by libraries aren't ready, and we talked about that earlier as well, didn't we? It requires from librarians a lot of experimenting with new tools and training. So, and we also heard that OCLC has a role to play in this area. So we are now at the end of the presentation, and I hope you have a good idea of how OCLC is helping libraries to prepare for the next generation of metadata. And of course, like Ellen said, this is only the beginning of the journey, and we hope to hear from you too, from our colleagues in Norway, so that we can all join in the same effort to realize this shared vision of an ecosystem of the next generation of metadata. So maybe you've had some time and some inspiration to put some more questions in chat now. And we've got some more links for you as well. This is the link to the discussion series and the blogs you can see on Hanging Together again. Let us know, David, if there are any questions we can answer.
Yeah, I'm looking. There was a comment that came in just after the last question, which was well, it's more of a comment that the relationship between trust and quality,
Yes.
Quality control, and I think this is a bit of what you spoke about just now, that the fear of giving up control and the quality, and
yeah.
One of my answers would be that maybe we haven't got a choice, that there's so many resources to describe, but we've got to work together.
Yeah.
We can't do everything ourselves.
Yeah, we have to forge more alliances and trusted relationships with other organizations and stakeholders. It will be more important, yeah.
So if there's any more questions to Titia or Ellen, I highly recommend reading the report. That is, it was very interesting, very well read, with many good points. And I liked as well that they had a sort of corresponding bibliography, which links to all these blog posts. So this is very interesting.
Lots to read, yes. Well, and you know, if you would like to receive and to stay up to date, then you can always update your email preferences at this URL. And so that you are sure that you don't miss anything of what's happening. It's all so exciting.
But you said something earlier about was it the outside in and the inside out?
Yeah.
Could you say a little bit about what the change is? What's the characteristics of these different models?
Yes, sure, I will. Yeah, it's very interesting, and there's a lot written about that as well, mainly by Lorcan Dempsey, who is our chief strategist and also head of the research department. So the outside in collection, it's an illustration of the kind of collection development that libraries used to do for decades, for a century. And that is, you know, everything that is published to get a good representation of what is being published out there, to get it in your collection. And so you could even safely say that if you take all the collections of all the libraries worldwide, that you would have probably 80% or a bit more of everything that has been published in the world. And that was in the print era, very much so. But of course, this is changing very much so. And so instead of, you know, getting the outside into your collection, now there's a trend to let that go a bit, but to focus on the inside out collection. So to focus on what is produced internally by your own institution, by your own university, by your own researchers. Make sure that you collect everything that is produced internally and make sure that it is disseminated to the outside world, so that is inside out. And it's not only what is produced now by research, but also what the library has in terms of special collections and digitizing it and making sure that it is also, again, visible and disseminated to the outside world. So that is the inside out collection. And then the facilitated collection is something that we are seeing more and more. And that is another direction in which libraries say, oh, well, you know, besides the inside out, it's very difficult to collect any outside in anymore because either it's very expensive for us, it's too expensive with the big deals and so on, or, you know, there are so many aggregations and content aggregations and providers already providing access to open content, for example, on the web. What is our role? And then our role becomes as libraries to facilitate access at the point of demand. So when a patron, a researcher or a student asks for a specific resource, that the library then facilitates access to that resource. So that is the facilitated collection, basically.
And the inside out, what is the role of the library? Can we think that maybe it's not the librarians that are creating the metadata in that world, that so the librarian goes from the creator of the metadata to some sort of mediator, some sort of quality control person, and maybe a more educational role, educating the people who are actually creating the metadata, whether this is researchers or specialists in the special collections, or
Yeah, certainly. Yes, it's awareness raising as well.
Yeah.
About metadata, because, you know, researchers, of course, were never used to think of their publications in terms of metadata, and it has become also much more. I mean, there's so many more authors of one publication. There's so much more licensing information that you need to put in the metadata field. So it's become, you know, much more complicated metadata, and at the same time, it's no longer the only how do you call it? The thing that libraries only do. It's something that everybody starts doing. Everybody is putting metadata everywhere.
Yeah, and some of this metadata is used to create metrics,
Yes.
to measure maybe universities' workload and researchers. So it's the metadata is more and more important, that it's done correctly and has the right identifiers. I think I agree very much with you, the importance of identifiers.
Yes,
yeah.
True. And so, yeah, there is a kind of a shift as well within libraries. You can see that with the Inside Out, that there is a shift from discovery, it seems, to analytics and metrics, as you say, because they are forced. I mean, it's not a choice. They're forced to do so as well, because their universities, for the university, it's important to measure excellence in this competitive environment, and also to, for accountability issues, which governments find more and more important, and funding agencies. So all the focus is on metrics and analytics and measuring and evidence-based. And it seems like discovery and finding things is becoming a little bit not less important, but it doesn't get the attention that it used to get.
Yep. Okay. Just check the chat on questions. I can't see anything more, so I wonder if we should wrap up.
Sure.
I just want to say that I'll be waiting for the 1st of January. The new entity system is ready, so I'll be sitting waiting to to try this. So I think it's a very good initiative, and it's really good to see linked data on entities and identifiers put into practice. So thank you.
Well, thank you.
Thank you for the work, and thank you for your interesting talk.
Thank you very much, David.
Yes,
and thank you all. It was a pleasure.
Okay, so